our Power Up virtual book club. We're moving into section 2, chapter 4. And I'm your host today, Dr. Jackie Cawley, and the author of Power Up. And I'm so excited that we're able to move into section 2 after spending time in section 1, the first 3 chapters, getting to know a lot more about yourself, what motivates you, what's most essential to you, and how you ended up to where you are today, how it may compare to where you want to go for the future best you. So in section 2, we're going to start to focus on power. In fact, section 2 is called Power Play. The real difficulty is to overcome how you think about yourself. Maya Angelou. I love this quote because I think it's so true. When we went through the 5 whys in the last chapter, we started to uncover those stories or narratives or limiting beliefs that we have about ourselves that can sometimes make it difficult for us to overcome how we think about ourselves because of the way that we are used to using those stories. Let's move into chapter 4 and the next step in the framework. Chapter 4, Expose. Now, expose is the E in power. It's the 4th step in the process of the framework. And it's asking us to become conscious of our limiting beliefs. Most people are living an illusion based on someone else's beliefs. Jen Sincere from the book You Are a Badass. I love the 2 quotes, the one starting the section in here in chapter 4, because Maya Angelou is saying that we are having difficulty overcoming how we think about ourselves. And here, Jen Sincere is saying that most people's illusions of how they're thinking is based on someone else's beliefs. So it's all really around beliefs. And once you become more conscious of these beliefs, you can do something about them. You can act upon them. If they're not working for you and helping you to get where you want to go, really get that level of transformative growth and sense of empowerment to move to where you want to be as your future best self, then you really got to act and do something, and you can once it's exposed and you become conscious of that. Let's move on with a passage. The brain and the nervous system are busy 24/7, 365, ensuring we are safe, taking data from our 5 senses, our emotions, and our thoughts, and figuring a way out to process, assess, and categorize that data. Then it can be interpreted and stored or acted upon. The way we do this is unique for each person. Everyone has a different way of experiencing the world and categorizing that data in their brain. As we experience the world, we learn. We continually take in information and store it in our memory banks for future use when and if we need it. For example, when we are toddlers and we reach for the stove and we are told it is hot and to move away, if we do not follow the directions to move away, we experience pain. We learn to associate a stove with hot and the sensation of pain, and we act differently after that. We avoid touching a hot stove to avoid pain. In much the same way, we learn about our whole world. That complex system of neurons takes all of our data, and over time, through our experiences and the way we each uniquely store that data and categorize that information, we create our story, our personal narrative of how we see and experience the world and how we perceive ourselves. This narrative or story influences how we think and how we act. Why is this important? In the last chapter, you took the time to ask why you have made certain choices in your life, why you acted or reacted in certain ways to better understand how you arrived at a place in your life that may be incompatible with your passions and your purpose and your values. Generally, it is because of how your narrative has influenced your decision making. So, what this is telling us is that our brains are working all the time, taking in information, start of the day that you were born, even beforehand. That information gets laid down. And as we make sense of the world, and our brain is trying to keep us safe, and keep us from harm and make it as easy as possible for us to do the things we need to and conserve energy, then it makes a lot of sense that over time we start to have this story or way or lens of seeing ourselves in the world, experiencing ourselves in the world. I know that's really true for me. When I went through the 5 why process, I could see that I was carrying forward things that I learned to do or behave in certain ways as a child because I thought it was the right thing to do and it was safer for me, or I felt better about myself because of it, and I carried that forward into adulthood. But it didn't work there. Coping mechanisms that worked really well for me as a small child did not work for me as I got to be an older adult. The cool thing is that just like you learn something, you can unlearn it. And we'll go into more of that in chapter 5. However, what I want to start with is really that whole concept of becoming more conscious of the way that you perceive yourself in the world. And as you become more conscious, having the ability or the power, becoming empowered to make changes and act differently going forward. So I think now it would be a great time to move into some of those discussion questions and reflect a little bit more on a few points that this chapter brings out that I think are important to pay attention to for yourself. The first discussion question for today: what did you expose when you went through that 5 why process in the last chapter? Was there a limiting belief or a story that you've been using or that you learned to make decisions in your life? Is there a story or some type of narrative that came up for you when you did that 5 why prompt? I know one came up for me for sure. It was all about my having to make other people happy as a people pleaser and to be good enough or perfect enough, and that would make everything better for me. And then I could be recognized and accepted by my boss and others, which made me feel better, safe, loved, or accepted, if you will. What did you find? Write it down in your journal or talk about it with a friend. Maybe just think about it. Take a few minutes to do so. Awesome. You're doing great work. Let's move on to discussion question number 2. Now, as I mentioned, when you become conscious or more aware of things, you can take action. And that's where the power comes in, really feeling empowered to own and be accountable for that story and then make changes to it. One of the things that's important as we move through this process is to pay attention to the emotions, feelings, and sensations that come up with some of these memories or with these aha moments that you are finding when you're uncovering and becoming more conscious or aware of some of those beliefs, stories, or way you're looking at yourself, that lens. So when you went through that process, and even with the last question that you reflected on, when you expose that, become more conscious, what feelings, emotions, and sensations did that invoke in you? What did you experience in your body? Where was it located? That's really important because remember, your brain is picking up a lot of data. So the data that it's using to store a memory for you and categories of information is not just what you're seeing or hearing or reading in front of you, or even when you're saying something and hearing your own voice. It's also what you're feeling at the time that these things are being laid down. So keep that in mind for the future, because your mind and your body are very connected, and the way that your brain works can be used to help you make changes and change your actions and behaviors in the future. So again, going back to that question, what emotions, sensations, and feelings did that consciousness of your story or lens, that awareness, bring up for you, and where are they located in your body? All right, let's move on to the third discussion question for today. Can you go back in time to the very first time that you can recall, somewhere in those memory banks, somewhere in your past, most likely your childhood, where you had the same set of emotions, feelings, and sensations in that area of your body that you just described through going through the first 2 questions? When was it? Can you describe the situation for yourself? What was happening? What age you were? What was the environment like? The reason for that will really become much more important as we move into chapter 5, where we figure out how we're going to take the information that we became more conscious of and relearn it in our brain. You can do that. Yes, you can. So go back now and think to yourself, when was the earliest time that you can recall feeling that same set of emotions, sensations, and feelings in that space in your body that you described in 1 and 2 from today? What was that time? It might take a little while for you to get there, but you will. Isn't it amazing to think that your brain, working 24/7, 365, ever since you were born, even beforehand, has been laying down information and storing information and then using that, and when your subconscious mind picks something up in your environment, some situation, a sound of someone's voice, whatever it happens to be, your subconscious will become alerted that there's a possible danger for you. Now, the danger may be real or it may be perceived, but to your subconscious mind, it's a danger and your brain's trying to keep you safe. So it will signal to you, generally in those feelings, emotions, sensations in your body. You'll notice those first, and then it may become something else that you become conscious of in your environment. And the book goes into that a little bit more in detail, gives you some examples as well. And you probably have a few examples from your own life. I know I do. So I think what's important here is that your body is a great way to learn when there may be an old situation or issue, limiting belief, or old way of thinking about yourself that doesn't fit anymore. And by being aware, by being more conscious, you can get past that difficulty that Maya Angelou was talking about, of moving past those limiting beliefs and let go of other people's perceptions. You can't change them, but you can change how you think. And we'll do a little bit more of that as we move into chapter 5. I hope you'll join us for our next session, and so great that you joined us today. Thanks, and have a great afternoon.